Lia is a visionary, a soul business and brand strategist, a creative director for women bringing their soul's offerings online. She specializes in helping people step confidently into their most creative and authentic self-expression to support their digital businesses through the means of Instagram. As a digital mystic and muse, her greatest joy is helping merge creativity, soul, content creation, self-expression, and entrepreneurship together as one. Welcome, Lia.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's so sweet to be here.
I am so excited to dive into your chart. So, I've been following and benefiting from Leah's work for a long time. She is one of my biggest inspirations in terms of the content creation game, as you'll find out more if you don't already know of and about her through this conversation. She has a really special, unique angle for how she shows up in the online space. So, I'm excited to bring that to everyone listening and through the deepened lens of like what makes you so unique and special.
Thank you so much.
I'm curious, how much do you know about your astrology so far?
I've been a dabbler, I'd say. I know enough to kind of get by, and I've had my chart read by different people, but I love when there's different lenses brought about it because then you're seeing it from a whole different perspective. So I would say I've kind of got the baseline foundation, and I know it's such a huge, huge, huge platform that, yeah, there's a lot I don't know.
Well, I want to start out probably with what you do know most about and talk about your big three of your sun, moon, and rising and kind of deepen from there. So, firstly, with your Taurus sun, which is very closely conjunct, which is just a fancy term for next to, holding hands with, kind of kissing and in symbiosis with your south node. Which, if you don't know a lot about the nodes yet, that is like one of the first things that blew my mind with astrology when I first started studying it and understanding it. And what's interesting is so your south node is Taurus, your north node is Scorpio, and we're actually opposite. So
Uh,
my south node is Scorpio, north node Taurus. So yeah, we're heading in opposite directions this life,
Interesting.
which is fun. And also, like, it's like we definitely hold codes for each other because basically it's like your south node is what you've kind of, it's like a past life familiarity. You kind of come into this life feeling really comfortable with it, really proficient in it, kind of having like a built-in mastery over it. And then we are given the challenge of starting to lean our way to the other side, right? So that other side being the opposite of what we're most comfortable with is going to be kind of beyond our comfort zone. We're kind of going to suck at it, like relatively, like it's going to feel kind of awkward and a little bit hard. But there's like an invitation there that every kind of rep that we do to choose to go that direction is like wildly fulfilling, even if it just is like little baby steps. So you are the embodiment, both with your south node familiarity and your sun, which is just like your identity, the center of your being. It's what animates and lights you up, with Taurus, which, as I already said, is my like I kind of suck at it side of things, but what I most came here to learn. I like to look at the archetypes as like getting back to the pure form of that it's an element expressing in a certain mode of movement.
Mm.
So with Taurus, we're talking about the grounded quality of receiving earth energy from out there to in there. There's like, I don't know, I want to describe this general kind of vision and feeling of someone like meditating on a rock, feeling really like secure, solid, they know where they sit. But then I also just want to like talk about your content and what your vibe is,
Mm.
and your stories. And if you guys haven't seen Leah and how she shows up in her stories, like I feel like one of your kind of trademark things is just holding, it's like the selfie emoji, you're just like,
Totally.
you're where you are and you're just like, here is your angle like into me and my position and my ground. So yeah, I don't know, I'd love to hear the method behind the grounded madness of what that is like for you to feel so grounded in a space where a lot of people feel very ungrounded. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks so much for that perspective because I've never thought about it like that. But that very much is, like the hand up, here I am. And I like that visual representation of like, okay, I'm rooted and I'm allowing these people from all over the world to view me, to be visible to that perspective. And I think for me, it's taken practice, of course, to be visible, and it's something I'm still learning how to expand into more as I imagine and desire my online presence to get even bigger and bigger, my work to get bigger and bigger. And I think that in general, that rootedness and that groundedness and that connection with the earth and just my center and my core is something that I've always had, even when I've, gone through many different hats throughout my life and had different times of feeling like I didn't really know who I was, et cetera, et cetera. But baseline, I've always kind of had my center, and that's been the thing that has guided me, and I think has also been what has allowed me to try on many different hats and go through many different life experiences, because yeah, I've always had that center point. And so in social media, that is my best friend, and that is the thing that I also try and help connect the people I work with to in themselves, of like, where's your center point, no matter how anyone's going to perceive you, because we can never really control that at all, actually. But no matter how the external is going to receive us, how can you know yourself so deeply that it doesn't actually really matter how you're being perceived?
I love that. And you wove in the other side of the equation, like the
Mm.
Scorpio North Node that becomes so much more, again, I want to use the word grounded, but like it's like a safer space to explore in, like that whole realm that you're talking about of like transformation and exploring wearing different hats and like being willing to shapeshift and try different things on through your expression is made possible in a responsible way through that Taurus
Mhm.
counterpoint, that grounding anchor of like, this is all just kind of play and exploration, but that there's this baseline, like you said, of being grounded within that exploration, the transformation, the healing, the edges that it takes us to show up in our expression online, like while we're going through these things. So your North Node is there in Scorpio, as is your Jupiter. So
Mhm.
both of those are such a space of like fortune and possibility and like
Mm.
expansion. So for you, those are both marked, whether it's the going beyond your comfort zone to explore the paces beyond that, or expanding and, like you said, reaching more people, going bigger, making a bigger impact, making more money is a big part of that Jupiter code of expansion. For you, it's all that realm of Scorpio. And that's the other thing that I've noticed in how you show up online is your vulnerability and transparency while making art with what you're actually going through in your personal life and being visible around that and being an example again of that synthesis between the two, like they're opposites, but when you're using that Taurus sense of strong identity and security to reach out to the edges and be willing to be seen in that place, it's something that in your style, you make art out of. I'm curious how that edginess has invited you or called you forth through the vehicle of your business.
Yeah, I mean, definitely a big passion of mine is finding the place where personal and professional get to merge as one. It's a big part of why I decided to be on the entrepreneurial journey, is because I wanted to make my own rules of like, how do I get to arrive? How do I get to shape my experience of work in a way where my human is at the forefront of it? And it gets really interesting then when we're playing with social media to be the vehicle for that expression, because so much of it feels just inauthentic. It feels like there's masks. It feels like everyone's trying to be somebody. For me, in my ability to be vulnerable, I'm only ever really sharing the things that have been integrated. And I feel like that, again, comes back to really knowing who I am and having that center point where I know what I can share, even if it feels vulnerable to the external world. Like, I know that I've already integrated enough to where no matter what feedback I'll receive from that sharing, I've still got myself. And I know that for me, like the people that I trust professionally are the ones that I can feel their human, feel their heart. Of course, you know, if you're just going to have someone teach you how to, you know, like fix a part of your car, let's say, it's like you don't necessarily care as much about who they are as a person versus like getting coaching work or something. But if you have 5 different people that are all going to teach you how to replace this part of your car, it's like you're going to move towards the one that you feel either is the most skilled or the most personable and that you connect with the most. And ideally, it's a combination of the two. And so I really love the knowing and the experience that the more I allow myself to be seen, the more I'll actually attract in clients and people that resonate with me and that I can also impact the most because there is that resonance there. It's a practice, and I've, you know, explored all the different parts of like how much do I share, how little do I share, and the bigger that my reach has gotten, I have kept my personal world more close to heart, but I also move in a way that people have connection to my energy. And that's really how I look at it all, is like energy transmission, and how even if I'm not saying the thing, how can I still allow myself to be felt? And that's where the art comes in, of how do you alchemize the internal experience to be something that is visually represented through words, images, videos, etc.
Yeah, so you mentioned like the masks that people wear and how it's important to you when you've integrated it so that ultimately, obviously, you focus on the angle of inspiration through making art out of everything that you express. But also, it's like you're creating this beacon of hope for people. You're like, look, like ground with me into the reality of like this is what we have to go through, but like look what we can do with it. We can make art with it. We can alchemize it, transmute it into inspiration. And I feel like that's the perfect segue into your rising, which we'll come back to your moon, but it's just too good to look at the example that you are of bridging those two archetypes on the wheel from Scorpio to Sagittarius, which is your rising sign, of that transition from being willing to go in, get real and vulnerable with our emotions, our processes, all of the chaos that our experiences throw us into, to ultimately go through the dark night of the soul, into the underworld, out the other side, and rise like a phoenix from the ashes into that space of like, yeah, but look where this got me. Look what's possible now that I was willing to go through that. And that is the way that you create that bridge through your example. You know, you're like, look, both. Like, yes, this is what happened, but this is where it's gotten me. This is how much more inspired I feel to make art and show up for you guys. So, yeah, open to hear any reflection on that side of it in terms of your motivation to like show up and talk about those harder things.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. I feel like, you know, so for part of my work is really around helping people just clarify what their brand really represents. And I won't go into like the whole structure of that, but the why is really the altar we return to in our work again and again, where we leave our offerings, or we come back when we forget, where we need the re-inspiration. It's like, why are we doing what we're doing? And for me, that's around radical self-expression. I want to help inspire people to be who they came here to be. And a big part of that is like owning our experience and loving our experience, and even the hard things that have happened. It's like, how do you alchemize that? How do you use that as fuel? How do you allow the circumstances of your life to be inspiration rather than things that like pull you down? And for me, it's like, you know, that scorpionic energy. I've been there. Like I've been in the places of challenge, and I've been someone that has really decided to use the circumstances of my life to be something to inspire me. And I guess I've just had a lot of people in my life where I have seen they haven't been able to access that and choose that. And so it's really important to me to be like, hey, y'all, it can be different. Like, you can choose different. And choice is the holy grail for me. It's all about choice. And so outside of all the different things I talk about, I share about, et cetera, like it really comes back to that place of I want to help people remember that they have the choice to be who they want to be. And that's really like my why.
If you're not seeing this on video, Leah just made like a frame with her hands, and I just saw so much of the purpose and the deeper meaning behind your meme creation. It's like using memes to choose what your frame of anything is, you know? And with Sagittarius, we're looking at the kind of dynamic spiral momentum that happens with the fire element when we, like you said, inspire others through your process, through being willing to frame it as something that is inspiring, as an inspiring story, express that out into the world, and then through that expression create the living art, the frame of your life as art that inspires you, and it becomes like this feedback loop of inspiration. I want to bring in the storytelling piece as we transition over to your moon. One, because that is a new offering that you have that you're supporting people with through the deeper thread of storytelling in our stories and our expression. And your moon is in Gemini, which is the storyteller. Gemini is like how we were talking about with Sagittarius being that feedback loop of inspiration and the fire element. Gemini is that feedback loop with the air element. So it's how we share our ideas with other people and create narrative for others that then they can see themselves inside of, the power of the story. And then they're able to then give us the feedback of these missing pieces or these, you know, things that are potentially blind spots for us. And it creates this cyclone of plugging each other's blind spots, basically, and creating these longer tapestries of story. The other thing, though, relative to that bridge that we were just talking about with how Scorpio creates this opening when you're willing to do that work into this rise of Sagittarius, Gemini, when it comes to the mythological origins, was the archetype of Hermes that could actually go between realms, was the only one that could, right? And the reason that he could is because he was able to go into those dark places and be a translator to turn them into story and bring them back to the people so the people could benefit from and understand and have some, you know, way of seeing what others have gone through. So I don't know. I just love to hear more about how story is weaving into all of this for you, with the lens that for you being connected to the storytelling piece, to the kind of translating into something that others can understand so that our experiences can be like a way shower for others. And also bringing in that you have this whole situation right there that's also Venus, your love language and how you relate with clients and other people. Mercury, how your mind is designed to work anyway. So yeah, tell me more about your story.
Yeah. Well, first, just the Hermes piece is so cool because I know you were in Mimi Mommy at one point, and that's like how I've always described memes, is they are Hermes of social media, the messenger, the one that gets to carry the transmission to all different places of the internet. But this offering storytelling and story selling, it's so simple, right? Because we have the Instagram stories, and it's like, you know, we do what we do. Everyone does it differently. But what is it to actually tell a story through putting these videos, these images out there? What is the story we're telling? And I've always really loved stories. Like, I love reading novels. I love hearing stories. I love like archetypal energy, Jungian psychology, different parts of what is it to tell a story exactly in the way you're just saying, where we get to pick out the different parts that resonate with us to teach us and learn through that character. When I think about storytelling in social media and with this offering, in one sense, it's telling our story, because I believe wholeheartedly each of us have a story that is so, so, so valuable. So valuable. And when we get to see ourselves, no matter what we've experienced, in the way where it's like, okay, I've lived an experience that is unlike anyone else on earth. Like, sure, there will be parts that are similar, but ultimately the ways that we've experienced our lives, unlike anyone that has ever been or ever will be ever. Like, it's a unique experience, and just that in itself, there's always going to be medicine for people to receive from that when we're able to share it in a story. But then also when we get into like branding and more of what my work is, what is the story of your brand? So we're kind of coming back to that why. For me, again, like choice, freedom of expression. What story am I telling and creating that can help inspire people without needing to say like, you need to do this and you need to do that. It's like we're positioning it and creating it in a way that is beautiful and artful and has this story arc with the intention of something being at the end of the story arc. Where do you want people to land? Where do you want them to end up? What do you want them to receive? And so for me, like, I love working with social media in the way where I'm finding different ways to have kind of creative boundaries and creating things like that, like a story arc, a structural piece that I can then go and plug in with my creative expression and have the fluidity and freedom, but I'm following these like guidelines that I've kind of created for myself as well as are pre-existing within the whole platform at large. So yeah, broad answer to the question, but I think that in general, it's just around like really tuning into what is our intention here? What is our intention on social media? What story do we want to tell in that particular platform?
Yeah, I really loved in you talking about the structure that the intention or the overarching theme is where do you want to end up? Like, where do you want to land? Where do you want that story to take you? And just bringing it full circle to your Sagittarius rising, we can look to our rising sign for a big clue into our authentic branding, because that's going to be how we first occur to people before they really get into our world and know us better and the nuance of how we help people. It's like, how do we come off to people immediately? And for you, that's like that Sagittarius, make art out of it, let it elevate you. You know, where do you want this all to take you? Like, we all have to go through all this stuff, but like, what are we going to do with it? What are you going to do with it? What can I help you to do with it? You know?
Yeah.
So the other thing that I want to bring up that you may or may not know about yourself, this is like one of my favorite things to reveal in any reading, because I don't know of any reading astrologer, any app or software that tells you this about yourself when you look up your chart, which is the moon phase you were born under. And the reason that I think this is so powerful, besides that nobody knows it, which is wild, is that when it comes to the energy of the moment, if you think about moment to moment, there's nothing louder. You'd have to go look up in the app what's going on otherwise astrologically, but like, you know what phase the moon is because you can see it in the sky. And even people that don't pay attention to this stuff know the difference. Like, it feels different, the collective vibe of a new moon versus a full moon, right?
Yes.
Inward versus fully out there, crazy and expressed. And so this is like the loudest signature of the moment. And so, unsurprisingly, it was a big part of what was imprinted into you, the matrix of the energies of the moment of your birth and your first breath. So, your moon phase was a waxing crescent.
Okay.
So right after the new moon, right when it's starting to swell and grow, still very much tethered to what's beyond the visible, beyond the veil, right? You were just there at that new moon and the dark moon of anything's possible, you know, more of a feeling than a seeing or a knowing in the world, like leaning out, right? Like leaning into the world and what's possible in terms of actually like expressing that, like all that you are just connected with, all of that potential and possibility, all of that beauty and potential art, right? And that first moment of budding that into something that through, and I can say like your memes, your art, the way that you express that, it really does create this kind of breadcrumb trail back to that space because it's so closely connected with it. I'm curious, like, so there's that, right? There's like the quality of it, which is very much just the water that you're steeping in, that, you know, is just a part of your perspective. The world is just this budding expression of the ineffable. But also, it's a timing thing. That's like your time of the month, kind of like being the most grounded and resourced. I'm curious if you've noticed that the time right after the new moon, how that is for you relative to the rest of the cycle.
I am definitely going to pay more attention now. I can't say that I've fully marked that, but I know that full moons for me tend to be like, you know, they can be a lot for a lot of people, but
Yeah.
for me, it's like a little too bright sometimes is how it feels. But yeah, I'm curious to pay attention. And, like for me, visibly, when I see the moon, like that little tiny sliver, when it starts to grow, I'm just like, oh my goodness. Like that to me is where I'm like, like beauty. So yeah, like visibly, I think that is where I tend to I have tended to have some of the most powerful moments with the moon is seeing it like
Yeah.
that.
That's your home base. That's the first way that you ever met her, was like
Uh,
that. So the other thing that I want to look at that is one of the big reveals when I do my cosmic cash code sessions, which are specifically looking at your relationship with money through the lens of your chart, is what I like to call your money mode. There are 3 different money modes, and most people that are entrepreneurial are one of 2 of them. So there's the fixed one. First, I'll go into the ones that you're not, process of elimination. There's fixed money mode people, which I like to understand these through the different kinds of relationship. So fixed money mode people are people that are lifers. They find the offering or the service or the company that just like when they connect with it, they're like, this is the one, and they take it the distance, right? They go there 10,000 miles deepening into that one thing. Most entrepreneurs are not that.
yeah, definitely not that.
Right? This is not a journey of picking one thing and sticking to it. Sure, maybe we'll find things that really work and we'll integrate them in a very foundational way, but we're constantly, like you said, experimenting, exploring, trying on new hats. Okay, so that brings us to the other 2, which are the mutable and cardinal. One of them is the polyamorous and with money, and one of them is the serial monogamist. Which one do you think you are? Do you feel like it's more juggling many at once, or really kind of like leaning into and focusing and giving your due diligence and attention to kind of one at a time as you bring them into the
I
fold?
think more one at a time. Like, yeah, I have kind of the overarching umbrella that has different pockets of my focus. But yeah, even just my brain, it's like, it's challenging for me to launch multiple things at once. It's like I like to have my focal point. So it's probably
Okay.
the monogamist.
You guessed correctly.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you're a serial monogamist when it comes to how you are designed to make money. You're a cardinal money mode, which, like you just said, you feel scattered if you have to spread yourself in too many directions at once. That's mine. So I am a mutable money mode. Like I do really well if I'm actually like, there's like something I learn over here that I immediately can apply over here, and I kind of like bounce around. But for people that have a cardinal money mode, even though obviously one thing that we have in common is that we kind of get bored easily. Like we get these sparks of, oh, now I want to do this. Now I want to do this. But for you, it's more you get the idea and you really do well giving it your focus, kind of like a new relationship, until you feel like you've really given it everything that you have to offer it to get it kind of on its feet, get all the feedback that you need, really get it to where it feels like it's flowing and functioning well before you can start to feel that next spark of inspiration at the same time that your energy is really overflowing and pouring out and ready to move on to the next thing. This is one of those things where like when I tell people this, it's so affirming. They're like, oh, I thought this, that, or the other judgment thing about how I do it, but like you're actually completely designed not only to really lean into the one thing at a time, which is something that we maybe glorify, the ability to do that. But on the other side, move on when it feels time to, and chase that next thing that inspires you to enter into the creation process with.
Yeah, that feels super helpful and resonate. I mean, I have certain friends that are coaches and they are like launching 5 different things at a time. And I think I've had this idea of like, one day I'll be able to do that. And it's just like, maybe, but also for me in my own design, that feels it feels challenging. And beyond challenging of like, I couldn't do it because I know I could, but I like to just like fully pour the energy in, especially when I'm working with the energetics behind the scenes of Instagram. It's like, I like to really build up the energy of an offering, and I'm like tending to that altar behind the scenes and then bringing it online. It's interesting to me, intriguing, the people that can run many at once, because I definitely, I feel like that's super true of just full devotion. yeah, full devotion for me.
Yeah, I'm seeing some things swirl together right now of the altar of the story, and that your
Mm.
design is to really like let the whole story play out before you're ready to move on to the next thing and start a new story with a new offering.
I love that. Exactly.
So, one more thing I want to bring up and ask you about before we transition into something I'm dying to bring up and
Mm-hmm.
talk about for the timeliness of this conversation is, so you took my money attachment style quiz. And I just want to, yeah, like talk about the result for you and what your journey with the money side of things has been
Mm-hmm.
as you have grown and scaled your business. So you got the avoidant attachment style,
Mm-hmm.
which I like to call the carefree creator, which it's fitting for
Mm-hmm.
sure because you're more focused on the art and the expressive side of it. Most of the people that I end up supporting have this attachment style. They finally decide to work with me when they're like, okay, I'm done looking away. I'm ready to, look right at it, lean in, and get this piece sorted. Can you just share what your relationship has been with the ritual of tending your money and maybe how it's changed from the beginning to where you are now, making more, and yeah, anything that you want to share about that backstory?
Yeah, I mean, the backstory feels huge because I'm kind of the classic example of, hippie gone rogue that decided one day that they actually wanted nice things and comfort and money and just to feel secure. The money healing journey has been a pretty big one for me in my life. And now at this point, I don't feel like I'm like healing it, quote unquote. That's been done in the past. And I am still learning just like financial literacy of what is it to be financially literate in general, as well as being an entrepreneur and not really having many places to turn for support in that. So I think, when taking some of the questions or doing your quiz, it was like, okay, the interesting balance between the carefreeness as well as like for me, a lot of my pricing, my new offerings, etc. It's like this very intuitive thing. That's why I say like digital mystic is because a lot of it for me is all spirit driven. And, when I'm looking at where I want to go and what I want to create and what I have been in the process of kind of figuring out how to do, like I need more strategy and more structure. Again, like having more structure in place to where when I have this spirit driven idea, like, okay, I want to create this whole new thing. I still have my baseline foundational pieces there where I'm generating a certain amount of income. And so that's what I've been focusing on in the last 6 months really is like, how do I go about that? And I know that there's still a huge expansion point for me in becoming more literate. And I think a lot of that within this too is just figuring out how to like literally just the structure. I would love to have more secure attachment with it, but I do pay attention to my finances. I'm checking in. I'm not as avoidant as I have been at all in the past. And I think that the avoidance comes more in the sense of building the whole foundation from the ground up by myself is just, yeah, I'm learning as I go and haven't really had any support externally to know how to do that. So,
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we weren't taught this stuff. We were taught to be good little employees. We were not taught to have empowering relationships with our money where we can grow real wealth. And while there are definitely basics to learn around how the game works, which I think part of the clash for creatives, carefree creators, people with the historical avoidant attachment style with money, the avoidance is totally valid in part because it's not an intuitive game. I used to be a tax person, and part of it was like letting my clients know, like, look, this shit's weird. Like, none of it really makes sense. They've just been adding rules on top of rules on top of rules. So there is like a clash there. It's not that same intuitive, like, oh, this makes sense. It's like, no, you just need to learn how it works so that you can kind of benefit by, the loopholes that are available to you within it. There is this actual real game and way and set of rules to learn, but also from a kind of energetic quality, Taurus is that same sense of security and feeling really solid in your understanding of your position in this game and how things work. So just want to point to that like, you know, with your South Node and your Sun there, like you have a really natural capacity to align with a sense of security with your money on the other side of just like learning the weird way that it works, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I love knowing the way things work like that, but I want someone to teach me. That's kind of where I am. Like there's certain stuff I love to learn on my own, and there's other things of just like, okay, tell me what to do,
Yeah.
how to do it. So yeah.
Well, and then that points to, I don't want to go too deeply into this, but one of the things that we look at in the Cosmic Cash Code session is your codes of earning. And for you, they are very much connected to the Capricorn archetype, which is a lot of what we've been talking about here. Just like, give me a structure, tell me how it works, give me something I can reproduce, give me something that I can really lean into and know that I can be held and supported by, so that I can, you know, focus on all this other stuff. And I think that there's kind of like almost like an irony or a paradox that happens. You don't want to have to worry about that stuff so that you can focus on your creativity. But often what I see is that when there's that kind of neglect or avoidance, it creates this, I mean, I like to call it the concrete ceiling, but like it creates this burden that really does get in the way of a free flow of creativity, you know? So it's like being willing to do the like boring side of it actually clears so much space for creativity to come through. Okay, the thing that I am so excited to presence in this conversation, because I feel like it's such a serendipity around why we are having it right now, is you are so in your Saturn return right now. You could not be more so. Your Saturn is 2 degrees from yours right now. What do you know about your Saturn return and the rite of passage that you are balls deep in right now?
Oh my goodness. I mean, I feel like so much of it is what we were just talking about too, of like the systems, the structure,
Yeah.
where are things working in my life, where are they not working in my life? And you know, I really thought that I was on the other side of my Saturn return. I'm like, okay, cool, I did it, I made it through. I know some, and I also don't know like a ton, but I know kind of the energy of Saturn and the like rule following of like the authoritarian of like, okay, like follow the structure and do this the right way. And that's been a big piece for me of just like, where's my integrity in my life? Where's my integrity in my business? Where's my integrity in how I do things? Where's my integrity with myself? And just kind of in this fine-tuning process. But yeah, I'm super curious to hear just around this like tension point I'm in right now.
Well, one thing to speak to around the rules and your relationship to them, and this is the case for anyone, it's the story of the archetypes in the Wheel of Life, but also for you, you know, with your second house, codes of earning, starts with Capricorn and then goes into Aquarius. So that bridge is very much like learn the rules so you can break them. So, you know, to your point about like, where is this arc leading us? There is a purpose to learning the rules. And it's that then you're able to work them, you're able to loophole them, right? You can't play the game how you want to until you actually learn the rules of the game as it exists, right? So that's one thing just to point out specifically around some of the themes that you've been working through with yours. The other strokes that I'll add in painting this picture of what it means to go through your Saturn return is, you know, you mentioned what's working, what's not working. A big part of it is I like to think about it like the planet Saturn with the ring. The first 30 years of your life, you have this ring that is starting to form around you. And when you go through your Saturn return, you start to feel that ring closing. And you really have to decide what you are going to leave outside of it and what you are going to choose to keep inside of it. The way that I like to think about it as well is this dimensional shift that is happening, because while it's happening, it's all too easy to just be aware of what you're having to give up, what you're having to let go, like how things are closing in, right? That whole side of it. But what's actually happening is up until that point, expansion and spaciousness has been all about breadth, like all the different things that you could do, all the different things that you tried on, right? Like just this expanse endlessly into the horizon. when that circle starts to close around you, you are making the transition. It's like a 90-degree shift. You're going to go into depth being the realm that you have to explore. So you decide like what is that mountain you're going to climb, or that mastery that you're going to deepen, and what are those pieces that you are going to, triangulate into your unique like burrow down into deepening your mastery over whatever it is that you end up choosing to keep inside the ring. So that's one piece for sure. Another thing worth mentioning with it is, what are you pushing out? What are you letting go? One of the biggest tests of the rite of passage of your Saturn return is, are you willing to let go of that which is the hardest to let go of? Like, are you willing to sacrifice and lay on the altar something that you were absolutely attached to and invested in, with the trust that you're clearing space for what's yours and what's meant to be yours? But like in the moment, you don't know what's on the other side. I feel like that's the most confronting. I don't know. It's like the difference between a well-traversed Saturn return or not. If you're willing to do that, if you're willing to make that sacrifice, you open up into a whole new octave of what's possible for you and how authentic your path can feel. And I know you've shared a little bit through your story arcs, of some letting go that you've had to do lately. Can you share a little bit about, like, just in business, what it's like to already be so established and to be going through that process of having to like prune and let go to make space for what's next in your second Saturn cycle?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's so much, my mind's going in so many different places, but I think that a big thing that I've learned in my Saturn return, I kind of started like going all into my business probably around the beginning of my Saturn return, maybe a little bit longer before. And a couple months ago, I had some doubts basically over the last year of like, is this really what I want to be doing? Do I want to be online? Do I want to be doing branding work? Do I want to be doing coaching work? Just kind of like, what do I actually want? Because there's so much depth inside of me. And then sometimes I do get confronted with a place where I'm like, this feels shallow or whatever. And so that has been a part of my process. In the more recent months, after I had made that recommitment process of like, oh, this is actually what I really want, going through tumultuous times in my personal life where I was really in these super tender places of letting go of bigger dreams that I've really had, having my business as my anchor point was like the best gift ever. Like, I'm so thankful that I've created this platform, created this art, created this community, created this way to express myself, to help others express themselves. Like, there were many calls in the last few months where I'm like crying before my call. I'm like, okay, Lia, get it together, do my energy work, put on some fresh makeup, get ready for the call, but like so tenderhearted. And then at the other side of the call with these women all over the world, I'm like, wow, I feel so inspired, so grateful, so uplifted, and just right on purpose. So I think that, there's been that stretch process for me of like, how do I tend to these deep emotional processes I've been in personally, and then still show up fully for my clients and show up for my business, and see how the more I give to that space that I've created, the more it gives back to me. And so it's such a beautiful symbiotic relationship where they're both like pouring into each other. And yeah, I have no idea like how things will continue to evolve with what I'm doing, but I know for sure that this is what I want to be doing at this point, and I'm so grateful.
That was so beautifully said. How the piece around the structure that your business has become that is holding you through these big shifts that are taking place. And also that the magic in showing up for your responsibilities and the discipline that makes you have to like wipe your tears and show up, for your clients, and how that is like maturing you and grooming you and getting you to a place to be able to step up and show up in even bigger ways that just feel even more aligned. It's not an easy process to go through our Saturn return, but there is nothing like being on the other side of it. No, it still can be hard. But to the topic of the story arcs, I want to reframe the timeline for you of your Saturn return so that you can better understand your position in it right now, which is that from about 27 to 30 is kind of if it's a bell curve, that's like the rising of intensity to the peak of it. And then you're like we talked about before the call, right now through Friday, through the end of this week, Saturn is still kind of like moving toward your Saturn. And then Friday, he's going to turn around and finally start moving on. And that opens up this whole other half of your Saturn return that is the downslope and the integration. And I know you go to ecstatic dance, like the metaphor that I love to offer for that experience is it's like when you connect with someone energetically on the dance floor and you start moving toward them, and already like you haven't even met yet, you haven't touched yet, but already there's like chemical reactions happening through your energies mingling, right? And you can feel that rising as you come closer and closer together, and then the dance happens. And then after that, like, so that's like now, right? Like you're like full on like meeting Saturn. And then that second half is like the stepping away and, like feeling all the ways, all the things that moved inside of you and all the things that changed in you. And that whole integration process that really takes just as long as the lead up and lead in,
Wow.
So it's like chiller, but in its own way, it's like it brings its own kind of intensity. And that's why, when people ask me, when is my Saturn return over? My answer is always when you stop asking, because ultimately on the other side of that process, it's integrated. Like Saturn is now, you're one with Saturn. He is now shaping your perspective and your path forward. And that's what it means to arrive in your second Saturn cycle, which is about 33. So all that to say, yeah, you've got like a few more years of, and I feel like that's almost part of it, is it's such a long rite of passage that it's when you stop asking, you have arrived, right? It's like once you're not even thinking about when is this over, you're just like, all right, I'm in, let's do this.
Yeah, it's nice to know there's like more time too, because I want to clear out everything that's going to get in my way, and I want to like just keep tending to that process of the refinement that I've experienced the last few years. So that feels good to know there's time for the integration as well.
Yeah, it's a trippy time during our Saturn return. It's like simultaneously you feel this pressure of like, I need to figure it out. There's like a sense of urgency. But yeah, at the same time, there's this sense of like, oh, I also have the rest of my life to do all this. So, Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing the kind of like behind the scenes and in the mind side of what motivates you and where your expression comes from. For people that want to step into your world and check out some of the things that we've been talking about, where can they find you?
So I'm on Instagram at earth.echo, and yeah, that's my main domain.
All right. Well, that will be in the show notes. Thank you so much for coming on the show, and to everyone listening, thanks for tuning in.